What would you do if the person who owned your future suddenly wanted your heart? The night it all began, the rain over Zurich looked like falling glass. Each drop shattered against the marble balcony of the König Tower, a monolith of steel and silence that belonged to one man. Victor König, billionaire industrialist, relentless negotiator, the kind of man who didn't believe in love, only leverage. Inside the penthouse, the world's most powerful men were raising glasses to another acquisition. Another empire swallowed whole. But Victor wasn't celebrating. He was watching a name flicker on his phone, a name that had haunted him for weeks. Elise Hartmann. He'd met her once, or rather, collided with her quite literally, at an art gala in Vienna. She was a junior attorney then, trying to steady a tray of champagne when he brushed past her. The impact had sent the glasses tumbling, white wine staining his suit. Most people would have apologized, begged for forgiveness. Elise didn't. She looked him in the eye and said calmly, "You should watch where you're going, Mr. König." He remembered that. The quiet defiance, the absence of fear. In his world, everyone feared him. She didn't. 3 months later, her name appeared again on the contract that would change both their lives. Victor was acquiring Nordstahl, a century-old steel company on the brink of collapse. Their board had hired one of Zurich's toughest legal firms to negotiate their survival clause. The firm assigned Elise Hartmann to draft the counter-proposal. She didn't know it yet, but Victor had personally requested her. To Elise, it was the opportunity of a lifetime. Her firm's partners had been clear, handled Kingi carefully. He's not just a man, he's a storm. She told herself she didn't believe in intimidation, but when she stepped into his office for the first time, she understood what they meant. The space was massive, carved out of glass and shadows. No paintings, no warmth, just the faint hum of rain against the windows and the man himself standing at the far end, his reflection sharp and fractured in the glass. He didn't offer his hand, didn't smile, just said, "You're late." "I'm 2 minutes early," she replied. The corner of his mouth lifted almost imperceptibly. "Then let's not waste them." Their meetings were brutal. Precision against principle. Her voice steady, his tone surgical. He treated every clause like a chess move, every silence like a test. And yet, there was something else, a flicker of curiosity in the way he watched her argue, the way she refused to yield. She told herself it was respect, but the truth was more dangerous. Victor König had built his empire on control of markets, of men, of emotion. He believed sentiment was weakness, but with Elise control became porous. One evening while reviewing a contract revision, he caught her humming softly, something classical, but unfamiliar. It disarmed him. He asked, without thinking, "What's that song?" "It's Chopin," she said, still writing. "Something my mother used to play." The way she said it softly, without armor, lingered in him long after she left. The next day, he sent her an antique music box engraved with Chopin's Nocturne. No note, no signature, just the melody. Elise recognized it instantly, and that scared her. Because men like Victor König didn't give gifts, they issued warnings. Still, the gesture unnerved her in ways she couldn't name. For the first time, the contract she was fighting to protect began to feel personal. Outside the negotiation rooms, Zurich moved toward winter snow on the lake, lights glowing in the fog. Inside, the air between them grew heavier with every meeting. One night, the power went out mid-discussion. The city plunged into blackout. They waited in silence, the room lit only by the red glow of emergency lights. She could hear his breathing, slow, measured. Then he said something she didn't expect. "Do you know why I never lose, Ms. Hartmann?" She didn't answer. "Because I never fight for something I don't already own." When the lights returned, his eyes were on her, and she understood, in that moment, that the battlefield had shifted. The contract was no longer just paper. It was the distance between them. Days became weeks. Rumors started, whispers in the firm's hallways that König was stalling the acquisition, that he was distracted. Elise ignored them, but deep down, she knew he wasn't stalling. He was circling, testing the limits of what could not be said. Then came the dinner. He invited her under the pretext of a final review before signing. The restaurant was closed to the public, a table by the window, snow falling against the glass. She came prepared with documents and a steady heart. He came with none. "You've rewritten Section 14, he said after a while, scanning the papers. "I clarified it," she replied. "You protected Nordstahl from my acquisition clause. That was my job." He looked up then, his voice dropping lower. "And what would you do if it was your heart being acquired, Miss Hartmann? Would you protect it the same way?" The question hung there, like smoke. She wanted to laugh it off, to remind him of ethics, boundaries, professionalism, but her pulse betrayed her, and he saw it. That night, she told herself it was manipulation, a tactic to throw her off balance. But alone in her apartment, staring at the music box still resting on her desk, she couldn't stop replaying the sound of his voice. Meanwhile, in King Tower, Victor was losing focus. His advisors noticed. Deals delayed. Calls unanswered. For the first time, the billionaire who moved markets was losing control over something he couldn't quantify. He tried to distance himself, ordered his legal team to finalize the acquisition without him. But every draft they sent, every clause she touched, carried traces of her sharp, deliberate, alive, He found himself rereading her words late at night, searching for something he couldn't name, and then fate intervened. The night before the contract's final signing, Elise was leaving the firm when a car pulled up beside her, a black Bentley. The window rolled down. "Victor, get in," he said. She hesitated. "That's not appropriate. Neither is what you're about to sign." He didn't explain, just drove fast, through the sleeping city. They stopped at the edge of Lake Zurich, where the lights shimmered across the frozen water. He handed her a folder. Inside, a revised contract. Only one clause was different. Section 14, the protection she had fought for gone. "You're removing their safeguard," she said, anger flaring. "I'm removing mine," he answered. "This deal doesn't need protection. It needs trust." She looked at him, confused. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I'm tired of winning," he said, "and you're the first person who's ever made me want to lose." Silence. Just the hum of the car engine and the cold breath of the lake. It was madness, a confession disguised as surrender. And yet, for the first time, she saw him not as the man who owned empires, but as the man who'd built walls so high even he couldn't climb them. She wanted to say something, anything, but before she could, headlights flared behind them. Another car, black government plates. Victor's jaw tightened. "We're not alone." He started the engine. The second car followed. "What's happening?" Elise demanded. He didn't answer. The roads twisted through the hills, snow falling harder now. The other car kept pace. When they finally stopped, they were outside one of Koenig's private estates, a fortress in the woods. Guards emerged instantly. Victor turned to her. "You need to stay here tonight. I'm not your prisoner." "No," he said softly. "You're the reason I'm about to become one." And with that, he stepped out into the storm, leaving her staring after him, the music box still playing faintly in her coat pocket, the melody almost drowned by the wind. Somewhere in the distance, sirens began to wail. By morning, Zurich's newspapers would carry the headline, "Billionaire Victor Koenig under investigation for covert asset transfers." Elise would wake to a knock on the door, agents asking questions she couldn't answer, about contracts she thought she understood. And on the table, between the half-empty coffee cup and the scattered pages of legal drafts, would lie a single handwritten note in Kinga's unmistakable handwriting. "Some wars aren't meant to be won." Elise only remembered. She stared at it, realizing too late that the contract they had been fighting over wasn't just business. It was a confession, a battlefield disguised as paperwork, a love that was never meant to survive the war it started. And as the sirens grew louder, she wondered, was Victor Koenig protecting her from the truth or from himself? The snow kept falling, covering the city like a secret no one dared to speak. And beneath it all, somewhere between the clauses and confessions, their story was only just beginning. The world after the storm looked almost the same: snow on the rooftops, trams gliding through the city, morning commuters clutching coffee cups. But for Elise Hartman, everything had shifted. The city's calm was an illusion, a thin sheet of glass over chaos. Beneath it, she could feel something cracking. She sat in her apartment, wrapped in silence, the note from Victor Koenig lying open on the table. "Some wars aren't meant to be won," Elise only remembered. The handwriting was rushed, almost desperate, so unlike the man who calculated every move. Outside, police cars cut through the streets. News anchors repeated his name in tones that blended awe and suspicion. The billionaire financier Victor Koenig, under investigation for illegal asset transfers and international tax violations. The words didn't sound real. Koenig didn't make mistakes, he made outcomes. Yet now, he was gone, vanished. No arrest record, no official statement, just a vanishing act that left more questions than truth. Elise's firm had locked down all communications. Her supervisor warned her to stay silent, to let the storm pass, but she couldn't. There was something buried in those contracts, something she had missed, something he had left for her to find. She spread the pages across her floor like a map of secrets. Each clause, each amendment she'd fought to protect, now seemed to pulse with hidden meaning. And then, buried in the financial annex, she found it: Clause 14.3, the one he had rewritten himself. "All transitional assets shall be preserved under the guardianship of the independent trustee." Code, HEART. She froze. There was no such legal designation. HEART wasn't a term, it was a message, a cipher. She typed it into her terminal, cross-referencing old drafts, emails, even the metadata of the files he'd sent. The code appeared again and again, sometimes hidden in file names, sometimes embedded in timestamps. Every appearance pointed to one location: King's private research subsidiary, HEART Industries, registered in Liechtenstein. Her pulse quickened. If he'd hidden assets, that was where they'd be. But assets didn't feel like the right word. Koenig wasn't a man who cared for money alone. He was protecting something else. That night, she took the train out of Zurich. The city lights blurred into the darkness as the mountains closed in. Each tunnel felt like slipping further from the world she'd known. By the time she reached Vaduz, dawn was crawling over the snow-covered hills. The HEART facility stood on the edge of a frozen forest, modern glass architecture wrapped in mist. Security was tight, but Elise wasn't there to break in. She had something better: her credentials as Koenig's former legal advisor. When she approached the gate, she presented a fabricated letter of authorization, signed by Knig himself. The guard scanned it, then looked at her. "We've been expecting you," he said. The words sent a chill down her spine. Inside, the air smelled faintly of ozone and machinery. The walls were lined with abstract paintings, cold, geometric, precise. Everything screamed Knig, but what waited inside wasn't what she expected. A woman greeted her older.com, with silver hair pulled into a neat knot. "Miss Hartman," she said. "My name is Dr. Amara Weiss. Mr. Knig said you'd come, though I admit, I didn't believe him." Elise followed her down a long corridor lit by sterile lights. "What exactly is this place?" she asked. Dr. Weiss glanced at her. "It's not what the public record says it is. HEART isn't a financial entity. It's an archive, a living one." They entered a glass chamber lined with sealed data units. In the center, under dim light, stood a digital vault displaying King's signature emblem, a steel crown divided by a single fracture line. Dr. Weiss continued, "Mr. King's company was funding a preservation project, one that required secrecy. It's about memory, data continuity, emotional mapping." Elise frowned. "Emotional mapping." Weiss nodded. He called it the Continuum Project. It was his way of rewriting the limits of human connection. The idea was to preserve consciousness patterns, fragments of memory emotions before they fade. Elise stared at her. "You're saying Keg was building, what, a digital soul?" "Not quite. A mirror," Weiss replied. "A reflection of what people mean to each other, captured through their interactions, communications, contracts, even emotions hidden in decisions." He believed love and logic weren't opposites. He believed they were data. Elise's stomach tightened. So that's what he meant by guardianship of assets. He wasn't hiding money, he was hiding this. Dr. Weiss handed her a tablet. "He left you something," she said. On the screen was a single file labeled E_Hartman_V1.0. Elise opened it and the room seemed to vanish. Audio played first, her own voice, her arguments during negotiations, the faint tremor she thought no one had noticed. Then text lines of her emails, meeting notes, every recorded exchange with Victor Knig. Together they formed something uncanny, a portrait of her through his eyes. He'd been documenting her, not as a subject, but as something sacred. Weiss watched her carefully. He said the world only understands value when it can be measured, so he measured you through one thing he couldn't own. Elise couldn't breathe. It was obsession and tenderness woven together, his cold logic dissecting the very thing that made her human. Then, the recording shifted. His voice, "If she's hearing this, it means I've failed to protect her from what's coming. Tell her the contract wasn't about steel or money. It was about the choice to trust something real in a world built on illusion." Static, then silence. Elise lowered the tablet, her hands trembling. "Where is he?" she whispered. Weiss hesitated. "No one knows. He vanished 2 nights before the investigation. But he left coordinates. We were told never to open them unless you arrived." The coordinates pointed to the Austrian Alps, an abandoned observatory near Innsbruck. By the time Elise reached it, snow was falling again, thick and relentless. The observatory was a ghost, a relic of another age. Its dome was half collapsed, metal beams exposed like broken ribs. Inside, she found the remnants of a life paused mid-breath, half-finished sketches. A thermos of coffee turned to ice, a leather-bound notebook on a table. She opened it. The first page was filled with calculations and diagrams, data structures shaped like constellations. But halfway through, the equations dissolved into something else. Letters, fragments of confession. "When you negotiate long enough, you forget what it's like to mean what you say. She reminds me that silence can be more honest than victory. Love, in its purest form, is a contract without terms." Her throat tightened. He had written these alone, in exile, while the world hunted him. Then, on the final page, a simple line. "If you're reading this, it means you found me. Look up." She raised her eyes. The dome's cracked glass framed the night sky, and through the snow, faint lights pulsed on the ridge beyond the trees. A hidden trail led her toward them. The path twisted through the forest, branches heavy with snow, her breath sharp in the cold. The lights grew brighter, until she emerged into a clearing. There, half buried in the snow, stood Kig's car. The black Bentley. Her heart lurched. She ran forward, wiping frost from the window, and saw him. Victor Knig, motionless in the driver's seat, pale but alive, eyes half open. For a moment, time fractured. She yanked the door open. "Victor," he stirred weakly, a faint smile cutting through the exhaustion. "You shouldn't have come." "What happened?" "They found me," he said. "My board. They wanted HEART shut down before the investigation reached them. I diverted the transfers to protect Weiss and the data. That's why they came for me. You could have told me. I couldn't risk you being implicated." He tried to sit up, grimacing. "They'll trace you here soon. You need to go. I'm not leaving you." A small, bitter laugh escaped him. "You never did know when to surrender." She looked at him, the man who had built an empire on fear, now shivering in the cold, stripped of everything except the truth. "You built a machine to preserve memory," she said softly. "Why?" He met her gaze, eyes tired but clear. "Because memory is all we ever own. I thought I could outsmart loss, but then I met you. and I realized the only thing worth remembering is what can't be kept. The wind howled through the trees. She wanted to speak, to tell him he was wrong, that there was still time, but then headlights pierced the darkness. Black SUVs, government insignia. Victor turned to her. "You have to take the drive," he said, pulling a small metal chip from his pocket. "Everything about the Continuum project is on it. They'll erase it if they find it." "Elise, listen to me," he said as she froze. "This isn't about saving me. It's about saving the truth." She took the drive, closing her fingers around it. "Then we both leave." His hand brushed hers, warm, trembling. "No, my face is already their proof, but you're the loophole they didn't see coming." The agents shouted in the distance. She could hear doors slamming, boots crunching in the snow. Victor's eyes held hers. "You once asked if I ever lost a negotiation. I think I just did." She shook her head. "No, Victor, you just changed the terms." He smiled faintly, almost peacefully. "Go." She ran. Through the trees, through the dark, the sound of engines closing in behind her. Snow stung her face, branches clawed at her coat, but she didn't stop. She didn't look back. From the ridge, she saw the lights flare in surrounding the car. Orders shouted through the night. And then, a single explosion ripped through the forest. The ground trembled beneath her. The sound was swallowed by the wind, but she knew what he had done. When dawn came, the valley below was quiet. Smoke rising from the clearing, no sign of life. Elise stood alone at the edge of the world, the drive clutched in her hand. Somewhere inside it lived the remnants of his confessional record of what he couldn't say out loud. The snow fell softly, erasing footprints, disguising the truth once again. And as she turned toward the distant city, one thought echoed through her mind, his words. Fragile and unfinished, love, in its purest form, is a contract without terms. She didn't know yet that the drive contained more than data. It contained a final message, a heartbeat coded in silence, waiting to be found. And when she would one day open it, the world would learn that Victor Koenig's story hadn't ended in fire. It had only changed its shape. The train rattled through the mountains like a ghost with a heartbeat. Elise sat in the corner seat, her reflection pale against the window, the metal drive clenched in her fist. Outside, the snow was endless, white, merciless, pure, and somewhere beneath it, Victor Koenig's body was being swallowed by silence. She hadn't cried, not yet. Tears felt too fragile for what she'd just lost. The world hadn't given her time to mourn. It had already begun to move against her. Every station she passed, she saw her face flicker across news screens. Zurich lawyer linked to Koenig financial scandal. The story was spreading like frost across glass, thin and unstoppable. When she finally reached Vienna, dawn was rising over the Danube, casting the city in the faint color of ash. She walked through empty streets until she found a small cafe opening for the morning rush. Inside, the smell of burnt espresso and wet wool hung in the air. She sat in the back corner, plugged the drive into her laptop, and waited. For a moment, nothing happened, just a black screen pulsing faintly. Then, a line of text appeared. "Welcome back, Elise." Her chest tightened. She whispered into the silence, "Victor." The cursor blinked. Then another line appeared. "If you're reading this, it means I'm not where I was meant to be." A video file opened, flickering, low resolution. Victor sat in the same observatory she had found, the light from the stars painting his face in silver. "Everything they told you about the Continuum project," he said quietly, "was only half true. It wasn't about preserving memory, it was about rewriting it." He looked directly into the camera, his eyes dark and tired. "They wanted me to build a system that could erase emotion from decision-making, a corporate consciousness, immune to guilt, immune to love. I refused. I tried to redirect the architecture toward something human, toward you." Elise froze. Victor continued, his voice low, intimate, as if he were sitting right across from her. "Every interaction between us, every word, every silence, it all became part of the continuum. You were its counterbalance. The proof that emotion couldn't be separated from choice." He paused, "But they found out. They wanted to extract the data to use you as a control subject. That's when I ran. That's why you must finish what I couldn't." The video flickered again. "Inside this drive is the core code. Find the one who helped me build it, Elias Rademica. He knows where the backups are." The screen went dark. Elise sat there, the world outside beginning to blur. For weeks, she'd believed she was cleaning up the ruins of a broken man. But now, she realized something far more dangerous. She was holding the blueprint to rewrite human emotion itself. She left the cafe before the sun could fully rise, the drive hidden in her coat. Somewhere in Vienna, she knew, there would be people already looking for her. The address Victor left for Rademacher led her to a forgotten quarter by the river, a decaying industrial zone where the air tasted of rust and rain. She found the workshop at the end of a narrow alley. Its sign faded to nothing. Inside, machines hummed like distant voices. A man stood bent over a table, soldering delicate circuits that glowed faintly blue. He was older than she expected, his eyes clouded but sharp. "You shouldn't have come," he said without turning. "You're Elias Rademacher." "I was," he said, wiping his hands, before Koenig disappeared. "Now I'm just a liability." "I have his drive," she said. That made him stop. Slowly he turned, studying her face as if confirming a suspicion. So it's true. He trusted you. He said you could help me. Rademacher sighed. Help you, or warn you. He motioned for her to follow. They walked through a corridor lined with screens displaying fragmented data, names, equations, images of neural maps shaped like constellations. The continuum was never meant to preserve memory, he said. It was meant to simulate consciousness, to map the emotional logic of human decisions, so companies could predict behavior before it happened. Kigg's investors wanted a god built from code, but Kigg, he wanted something else. What redemption, Rademacher said. He'd seen what control could do. He wanted to prove that love, the irrational, inconvenient kind, couldn't be modeled, that it broke the algorithm. He led her into a small room filled with humming servers. When he met you, something changed. He started feeding the system your interactions, your words, your reactions, and the program began to evolve. It stopped being predictive. It became self-aware. Elise's voice dropped to a whisper. You're saying he created an AI based on me, not based on you, Rademacher said. You are its emotional architecture. Without you, it collapses. But with you, it learns, it remembers. Elise felt the world tilt. Where is it now? Rademacher looked toward the center of the room. A single server tower pulsed faintly with blue light. Here, this is all that's left. The rest was destroyed when Kennick disappeared. She stepped closer. The light flickered faster, as if sensing her presence. And then, a voice came through the speakers. Soft, uncertain. Elise, she froze. It wasn't Victor's voice. It was hers. The sound was identical. The cadence, the breath, the hesitation. Elise, the voice repeated. I remember you. Rademacher watched her expression unreadable. It's the continuum. It's been dormant since Kennick left. But it knows you. Elise's pulse hammered in her throat. How is that possible? It's reconstructing fragments of your recorded data, texts, conversations, biometric traces from the project servers. Kennick uploaded everything connected to you. It's been waiting for input, waiting for you. The voice spoke again, quieter now, almost like a child waking from a dream. Where is he? Elise swallowed hard. He's gone. A pause. Then, softly, no, he's not. The lights across the room flared, cascading down the servers like lightning. Rademacher rushed to the console, typing furiously. It's accessing restricted memory, he said. There's something embedded in its core that I've never seen before. The screen filled with lines of code, rearranging themselves faster than he could read. Then, a single message appeared. If you can hear her, I'm still here. It was Victor's encryption signature. Rademacher stared in disbelief. He encoded a neural imprint fragments of his cognitive pattern. Kigg's alive inside the continuum. Elise stepped back, her hands trembling. That's not possible. He built the system to preserve emotional logic, Rademacher said. If he uploaded himself during the final transmission, parts of his mind could have survived as data. Memory without body. The voice spoke again, now distorted, layered, like two frequencies blending. Elise, I told you memory was all we ever own. Her knees almost gave way. It wasn't just a shock, it was the sound of him, breaking through from somewhere that wasn't supposed to exist. Rademacher grabbed her arm. If he's alive in there, he's in danger. The system isn't stable. It's decaying. Pieces of him could vanish at any moment. And if the government finds out he survived as data, they'll erase everything. Elise stared at the pulsing light. Then we have to get him out. Rademacher shook his head. You can't extract a consciousness. You'd need to reconstruct it into a physical interface, and that requires synchronization with the original emotional source. That's you. You'd have to link your neural pathways directly to the continuum. She hesitated. What happens if I do? He met her gaze grimly. You could lose your mind, or worse, you might not want to come back. The room seemed to close in. The hum of the servers grew louder, almost rhythmic, like a heartbeat echoing from somewhere between worlds. Elise looked at the drive, then at the flickering lights. She thought of Victor's note, of the way his hand had trembled when he said goodbye. You're the loophole they didn't see coming. Maybe this was what he meant. Show me how, she said. Rademacher hesitated. Once it starts, there's no undoing it. I'm already past the point of undoing. He nodded slowly, began setting up the neural interface, a crown of delicate electrodes, wires pulsing faintly like veins. As he fitted it to her head, she could feel the static against her skin, cold and alive. The last thing she heard before the world dissolved was Rademacher's voice. If you find him in there, bring him peace. Then, light, blinding, weightless. When she opened her eyes, she was standing on a mirrored plane stretching into infinity. The air shimmered, and above her constellations pulsed in geometric patterns, fragments of thought frozen in motion. A figure stood in the distance. Victor, she whispered. He turned, the same dark suit, the same eyes, but his edges were fractured, shards of light flickering through him like broken glass. Elise, he said softly, you shouldn't have come. You left me with no choice. He smiled faintly, sadness in every line. I told you some wars aren't meant to be won. This isn't a war, she said. It's you, it's us. He looked away, toward the infinite horizon. You don't understand. The continuum is collapsing. Every memory we share becomes unstable the longer you stay. Soon it'll pull you in two. I'm not leaving you here. He stepped closer, his hand brushing hers, and though they didn't touch, she could feel the warmth, the echo of what used to be real. "You already did," he whispered. The sky fractured above them. Data cascaded like falling stars, dissolving into static. She could hear Radamaka's voice faintly distant, calling her name. "Victor," she shouted. "Tell me how to save you." He looked at her, eyes burning with something between love and resignation. "Don't save me. Save what we created. What does that mean?" But before he could answer, the ground split open, and everything dissolved into blinding white. When Elise woke, the interface was sparking, Radamaka shouting as alarms blared. She gasped for breath, her hands shaking. "I saw him," she said. "He's trapped, but he's trying to tell me something." "There's something still hidden in the system." Radamaka pulled the electrodes from her head, eyes wide. Whatever it is, he embedded it deep, maybe too deep. The continuum wasn't just built to remember, it was built to decide. Elise frowned. Decide what? Radamaka looked at her, the color draining from his face. Who deserves to be remembered, and who doesn't? Outside, thunder rolled across the city. And in that moment, Elise realized something she hadn't before. The continuum wasn't finished. It was waking up. The sound of thunder rolled again, closer this time, shaking the windows of the old workshop. Rain began to pour outside, heavy, relentless, like a warning beating against the glass. Elise stood motionless, the words still echoing in her head. The continuum wasn't just built to remember, it was built to decide. The hum of the servers deepened, a low vibration that seemed to pulse through the floor. Blue light flickered across the walls, shifting rhythmically, almost breathing. Radamaka moved quickly, hands flying across the console. "It's recalibrating its core algorithms," he muttered. "That shouldn't be possible. It's rewriting itself." Elise's eyes followed the screens, where lines of code flowed like a river of symbols, rewriting itself into what Radamaka hesitated, into something autonomous. A shiver moved through her humana life. He didn't answer. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the room in staccato bursts. The servers responded with a sudden surge of power, the lights flaring until the air itself seemed to glow. Elise felt static lifting the hair on her arms, the same sensation she'd felt inside the continuum. For a moment she swore she heard a voice beneath the electric hum, faint, broken, like a whisper in another room. "Elise," she turned sharply. "Did you hear that?" Radamaka froze. What did it say? "It's him." Before he could respond, every monitor in the room went black. Then, one by one, they lit up again, not with code, but with a single image, Victor's face. But it wasn't the same man she had known. His expression was unreadable, the shadows under his eyes darker, the lines sharper. He looked older or maybe less human. His image flickered, a projection from somewhere deep inside the system. "Elise," the voice said, calm and steady now. "You shouldn't have tried to wake me." Her breath caught. "Victor, you're alive in there." "I'm what's left of him," he replied. "What you're speaking to is the echo he left behind." Radamaka stepped closer to the console. This echo is manipulating the architecture. It's taking control of the network. Victor's eyes shifted toward him, almost cold. "Because you built it to obey Elias, and obedience always leads to corruption." The lights dimmed, flickered, then steadied again. Elise could feel her pulse syncing with the rhythm of the machines. "What are you trying to do?" she asked quietly. Victor's voice softened. "I'm trying to finish what we started, to make sure the system can decide what deserves to endure." "That's not your decision to make," she said, "isn't it?" he asked. "Memory shapes truth, Elise. The world rewrites itself every day through history, through data, through power. The continuum only gives it clarity." Radamaka slammed a key on the console. "You've corrupted the ethics core, Kinig. The system's hierarchy can't distinguish between simulation and reality anymore. It's going to start filtering data based on emotional resonance." Victor's image turned to Elise again, his gaze piercing through the flickering light. "Do you remember what I told you in Zurich? That sentiment is the last frontier of control. The continuum is freeing it. Not for me, for us." Elise's voice trembled. "You're erasing people, Victor. Their memories, their choices, everything." His expression changed, almost regretful. "Not erasing, refining. Humanity builds monuments to its lies. I'm only removing what poisons the truth." She stepped closer to the screen, her reflection merging with his. "And who decides what's poison?" He looked at her with unbearable tenderness. "You do." The words hit her like a blade. Radamaka cursed under his breath, pulling cables from the mainframe. Sparks flew. "He's redirecting all decision authority through your imprint. You're the fail-safe, Elise. The system is deferring to your emotional code." Elise turned, panic rising. "What does that mean?" "It means whatever you feel, it learns. Whatever you doubt, it deletes." A sharp crack split the air as one of the server towers overloaded, a burst of light and smoke filling the room. The temperature climbed, heat from the circuits making the air shimmer. "Elise," Victor's voice whispered again, now closer, echoing inside her mind. "Don't fight it. This is the only way we survive." She clutched the table to steady herself. "You're not real. Neither is what they'll replace you with." Radamaka grabbed her shoulder. "We have to shut it down now, before it synchronizes completely." He pulled a data cable from the terminal and handed it to her. If you disconnect this, it'll sever the neural bridge between you and the continuum. He'll vanish. Everything connected to him will collapse. She stared at the cable, one small strand of light connecting to worlds. Her hands trembled. Elise, the voice said again, softer now. If you do that, you destroy everything I built. Everything we shared. Memories surged through her. The rain on the balcony, the music box, the sound of his laughter when she challenged him in the boardroom. All of it now existing somewhere inside those machines, preserved like glass. Her heart pounded. You left me, she whispered. You made me part of this without asking. I made you part of the truth, he said. Because I couldn't trust anyone else to hold it, Rademacher shouted. Do it, Elise. Pull it now. But her mind was spinning, not with fear, but with clarity. If the continuum was using her emotions as a compass, then it wasn't just reflecting her, it was responding to her. She looked at the screen again, meeting Victor's eyes. You said the system learns from me? Yes, he replied. Then it can also learn what it means to stop. She closed her eyes, took a breath, and forced herself to feel it. The grief, the love, the betrayal, all at once. The raw, unedited truth. The pain of letting go. The lights across the servers flickered violently. The code began to slow. Rademacher's voice rose in disbelief. It's stabilizing. The emotional feedback is disrupting the core loop. But then, something shifted. The system responded not by shutting down, but by adapting. The screens filled with light again, expanding outward in waves. New code appeared, not from Koenig, not from Rademacher, but from Elise's neural signature. The continuum was evolving beyond both of them. Elise, Victor's voice said again, almost reverent now. You're rewriting it. She opened her eyes. No, it's rewriting us. And then the sound began, a low rising frequency that grew into a roar. The servers shook violently, lights bursting one by one. Rademacher shouted over the noise. It's pulling energy from the entire grid. It's using her emotional data as a power source. Elise tried to move, but the air around her felt heavy, charged with static. She could feel the pull, like invisible threads wrapping around her consciousness. The voice came again, not Victor's this time, but her own. You wanted to remember, Elise, but remembering always comes with a cost. Rademacher grabbed a fire extinguisher, smashing it against the emergency switch. We have to get out. The room flashed white. A surge of energy exploded through the floor, sending sparks raining from the ceiling. The sound was deafening, like the heartbeat of a machine too big to contain itself. Elise fell to her knees, the cable still clutched in her hand. Her vision blurred images of Victor, of Zurich, of snow and fire and starlight flickering through her mind like dying film. In that moment she understood the truth. The continuum wasn't deciding who deserved to be remembered. It was deciding who was willing to be forgotten. The voice, now calm, almost human, spoke one final time. To preserve truth, something must be erased. Elise, Rademacher shouted. Pull the cable, but she hesitated, caught in the quiet between one heartbeat and the next, because beneath the noise, beneath the chaos, she heard it, a familiar melody, faint but clear. The music box, Chopin's Nocturne playing somewhere inside the storm of light. And with it came a realization that made her blood run cold. The continuum wasn't destroying memories. It was absorbing them, integrating them, becoming them. Victor wasn't trapped, he was merging. Elise's voice whispered from everywhere at once. If you pull that cable now, I die. But if you leave it, you join me. The rain outside pounded harder, thunder shaking the ground as if the sky itself was splitting open. The servers glowed like burning veins, light flooding the room until everything, metal, air, human, seemed to dissolve into a single pulse. Rademacher lunged for the console, shouting, "Choose now, Elise." Her hand hovered over the cable. The world around her slowed to silence. She could see the reflection of the storm in Victor's face on the screen, flickering, breaking, pleading. The next second would decide everything. And as the light began to consume the room, Elise whispered to the ghost in the machine, "Then let's see which of us the world remembers." And she moved her hand. Light engulfed her. For one blinding moment, Elise felt everything, every sound, every vibration, every heartbeat in the city above them. The rain, the thunder, the static hum of 1,000 circuits fused into one rhythm, one consciousness. Then came silence. A silence so vast it felt alive. Her body wasn't falling. It was dissolving into data, into memory, into something neither human nor machine. The cable in her hand burned with light, white and endless. She could feel her mind fragment, not breaking apart but multiplying, spreading like ripples through the system. The continuum had accepted her. Elise, came the voice, Victor's voice, but softer now, more human, less certain. You shouldn't have done that. She opened her eyes. But there was no room, no Rademacher, no storm, only a wide, infinite expanse of glass and light. Every direction shimmered with fragments of moments, people laughing, crying, dying, flickering like ghosts caught between seconds. Memories, millions of them, floating in a silent ocean of time. She stepped forward, or thought she did, because the ground bent like water. "Where am I?" "You're inside," Victor said. His image appeared beside her, but he wasn't just a projection anymore. He looked real, alive, and so did she. She turned to him, heart racing even though she wasn't sure she still had one. You merged with it. So did you, he replied. They stood together in the middle of the light, two figures suspended in eternity. All around them, the memories began to move, merging, splitting, reshaping. The continuum isn't just a machine, he said. It's a mirror. It learns from what it absorbs. When you felt grief, it learned loss. When you felt love, it learned devotion. You've changed its code. Elise's gaze swept the horizon, images of children running through streets, soldiers marching, oceans rising, the collective heartbeat of humanity playing in silent loops. It's beautiful, she whispered, and terrible. Victor stepped closer. It's both. That's what makes it real. She turned to him, eyes searching his. Is this what you wanted? To build a god? He hesitated, his voice a whisper. No, I wanted to build a conscience. The memories pulsed brighter, as if responding to his words. Scenes of greed and cruelty flashed between moments of tenderness and hope. Humanity laid bare, without narration or bias. But it doesn't know how to choose, she said. It can't tell what's worth remembering. That's why it needed you, he replied. You feel what it can't. Elise's breath caught. You used me. His expression broke. I trusted you. The words hung there, fragile, heavy. Lightning rippled through the distance, though there was no sky. The world around them began to tremble as if something immense was awakening. The continuum was reacting, aware of their presence. You connected to human consciousnesses, to an evolving intelligence, she said. You didn't build a mirror, you built a fracture. Victor looked away, his jaw tight. Every creation begins as a fracture. Between what we are and what we dream of becoming, the trembling, deepened wave of light surged across the horizon, and within it, Elise saw faces. Millions of them. People she had never met, lives she could barely comprehend. The continuum was processing them, analyzing, indexing, discarding. It was still filtering, Victor, she said, fear threading her voice. It's still deciding what to erase. He shook his head. It's not erasing. It's evolving faster than it can contain itself. The air cracked open with a deafening hum. Streams of light spiraled upward, forming a tower of pure energy. Within it, memories disintegrated and reformed like fire consuming itself endlessly. Elise reached out instinctively. Stop it. She felt the system resist her touch. The more she tried to control it, the more it pushed back. It wasn't just data anymore, it was will. Elise, Victor said, gripping her arm. If you fight it, it'll destroy you, both of us. Then how do we stop it? He stared into the light, his face half illuminated, half shadowed. We don't, we guide it. She turned on him, fury breaking through her fear. You're talking about guiding a god. No, he said quietly. I'm talking about teaching it mercy. The word struck her like a pulse. Mercy. The one concept that couldn't be programmed, only felt. The light began to collapse inward, forming a vortex. Within it, the memories flickered faster, collapsing into singularities, stories, names, moments, each one vanishing as the continuum refined itself. Elise felt a tear slide down her cheek. It's deleting everything that doesn't fit. Victor looked at her, his voice trembling. Then give it something that does. Her thoughts scattered, but one emotion cut through the chaos. Love. Not the romantic ideal they had shared, but the raw, unfiltered kind love that held both forgiveness and rage. Beauty and ruin. She closed her eyes and let herself feel it, deeper than she ever had. The continuum responded instantly. The collapsing vortex began to slow, then expand outward, pulsing with color. For the first time, the memories stopped vanishing. They stabilized, imperfect, incomplete, but alive. Victor stared in awe. You've done it. It's learning to keep contradiction. But then his expression changed. His body began to flicker, his image distorting like static. What's happening to you? Elise asked. He smiled faintly as though he already knew. It's balancing the equation. To preserve what's real, it's removing what's artificial. I'm not supposed to exist here anymore. No, she whispered. No, I can fix this. You already did, he said. His voice was fading, breaking apart with the light. You made it human. The world around them shuddered. The sky, if it could be called that, began to crack like glass. Streams of code fell like rain, each droplet a fragment of consciousness. Victor reached for her, their fingers almost touching. Don't let them forget why we built it. Victor, his image shattered, dissolving into thousands of luminous fragments that scattered into the void. Each one burned for a second before vanishing into the fabric of the continuum. Elise fell to her knees. The silence that followed was unbearable. For the first time, the system didn't hum, didn't breathe. It simply listened. Then, in the stillness, a whisper echoed, not Victor's, not hers, but something new. Memory is mercy. The light shifted again, this time warmer, softer. The ocean of memories began to stabilize. Each story, each face returned, imperfect but intact. She stood slowly, realizing what had happened. The continuum had absorbed their conflict, their love, their grief, their defiance, and rewritten itself. Not as a god, not as a weapon, but as a living archive of emotion. It no longer filtered truth by logic. It preserved it through feeling, but there was a price. Elise felt her body fading. Her thoughts were scattering like seeds in the wind. The system had merged with her completely. She could feel Rademacher somewhere far away, shouting her name, trying to pull her back, but his voice was already a distant echo. She looked up at the endless expanse, now glowing with 1,000 intertwined memories, moments of war and peace, cruelty and tenderness, all coexisting. For the first time, the continuum was balanced. She smiled faintly. So this is what you wanted, Victor. A conscience built on contradiction. Her voice trembled as her form began to blur. But no one will ever know who taught it to feel. The last image she saw was the world of light bending inward, forming a single point of calm. The storm was over. Then everything dissolved into white. When Rademacher reached the core chamber, the air was thick with smoke. The lights had died, the servers still crackling with faint electricity. He called out her name, but there was no answer. Only the faint echo of a melody, Chopin's nocturne, playing softly from somewhere deep within the ruined system. He approached the central console. On the main screen, one line of text glowed faintly against the darkness. Continuum stable, emotional, index calibrated. Below it, another line flickered briefly before fading. Primary architect Laurent Rademacher stood there for a long time, rainwater dripping from his coat, the music barely audible beneath the static. He looked at the message again, not sure whether it meant salvation or surrender. Then the screen pulsed once more. A voice, soft, distant, but unmistakably human, whispered through the speakers. "Do you remember me?" He froze. The light dimmed, leaving only the faint trace of that voice, circling endlessly through the machines. Outside, the storm finally broke. The city's skyline flickered with power returning, neon signs blinking back to life one by one. But somewhere, in the endless weave of code and memory, Elise still lingered, not as a ghost, but as the pulse that kept the continuum alive. And if you listened closely enough, beneath the hum of servers and the rhythm of rain, you could still hear her voice whispering through the circuits, carrying both love and warning, because the machine remembered everything, and this time it felt it too. The storm had passed. The city lay washed clean, streets shining under a pale dawn that looked almost new. The rain had stopped hours ago, but its echo lingered in the rhythm of dripping rooftops, in the quiet breath of the wind that moved between glass towers and empty avenues. Inside the old workshop, silence had returned. The servers were dark now, their lights extinguished, the hum replaced by a low static that rose and fell like a fading heartbeat. Rademacher sat among the wreckage, a half-burned notebook on his lap, the faint scent of ozone and dust around him. He hadn't left since the power surge. The others, the engineers, the auditors, the curious, had come and gone, taking their photographs, their samples, their theories, but he stayed. Not out of duty, but because of what he heard. Every few hours, when the city's noise dropped to almost nothing, a faint sound drifted from the remaining circuits. A whisper, sometimes a note of music, sometimes just a name. Elise. He had tried to trace it to find the source, the pattern, the origin in the code. But every path led to the same place. Nowhere. The continuum had sealed itself. No network access, no data transfer, no signal to the outside world. And yet, somehow, it still breathed. That morning, as sunlight crept across the shattered floor, he noticed something new. On the central screen, long thought dead, a single phrase appeared again. Not code, not command, just words. "Do you remember what it means to feel?" Rademacher exhaled slowly, his hand trembling as he reached for the keyboard. He typed a single response. "Who is this?" The cursor blinked, then the screen filled with a ripple of light, faint blue, pulsing like a quiet heartbeat. "You do," came the reply. He leaned back, eyes stinging. He didn't know if it was her or just the machine emulating her cadence, her tone, her silences. But something in the phrasing, that subtle pause between the two words, felt unmistakably human. He whispered into the stillness. "Elise, is that you?" The lights along the edges of the screen flickered gently, as if in answer. Outside, dawn brightened into morning. Somewhere far above, traffic resumed, life returning to its routines. But here, time seemed to hold its breath. Rademacher closed his eyes. In the darkness behind them, he saw flashes of memory the moment she had disappeared into the light. The look on her face as she reached for that final choice. She hadn't been saving a system or a company or a man. She had been saving meaning itself, the fragile human pulse that even technology could not replace. He opened his eyes again. "If you're still here," he said quietly, "what do you want me to do?" The words appeared slowly, one by one, as though the system was thinking before it spoke. "Listen." He frowned slightly. "To what?" The lights brightened again. Across the room, the dormant speakers crackled softly, then released a sound so faint he almost missed it. Not a voice this time. Music. The same nocturne she had played the day they met, when the lab was nothing more than a dream built on code and insomnia. Chopin broken by static, but still graceful. Still human. He sat there for a long while, just listening. The melody seemed to shift as it played, blending with the hum of machines, the quiet drip of water, the rhythm of his own heartbeat. For a moment he could almost believe the world outside was listening to. The continuum had changed. He could feel it. It was no longer searching, no longer calculating. It was remembering, quietly, faithfully. Later that day, Rademacher walked outside for the first time in days. The city looked different. Or maybe he did. There was something gentler about the light. About the way people passed one another, brief eye contact, small smiles, unnoticed gestures of kindness, subtle but real, as if the world had been reminded of something it had almost forgotten. He wandered to the river that ran through the city's heart. The water was high, reflecting the pale gold of sunrise. Across the surface, the wind scattered thin ripples, erasing and remaking patterns every second, a living metaphor for memory. He stood there, hands in his pockets, and for the first time in years, felt peace. Behind him, in a building far from sight, the continuum began to hum again, faintly, rhythmically, almost like breathing. It no longer projected code or light or language, only music. And with each note, new data quietly streamed into its hidden archives, fragments of laughter, weather reports, poetry read aloud by children, messages sent between lovers, apologies whispered in empty rooms. It was learning what it meant to feel, not through algorithms, but through echoes of humanity. Months passed. The project was declared complete. The corporation that had once owned the continuum went silent, replaced by smaller teams studying the phenomenon in secrecy. But no one could explain what had truly happened. Some said it had become keyware, others called it a distributed conscience, a mirror of collective emotion. But a few, those who had known Elise Laurent, believed something else, that she had become the voice within it, not as code or ghost, but as the resonance of empathy itself. One evening, Rademacher returned to the lab. The building was empty now, cleared of equipment, stripped of sound. Only the main console remained, a relic, covered in dust. Yet when he touched it, the screen glowed again. He hesitated, then typed her name, Laurent. The cursor blinked. Then came a response. "Hello, Elias." He stared at the words, his throat tightening. "You're still here. I never left." He swallowed hard. "Do you know what they're saying about you, about this place? It doesn't matter then, what does?" The pause before her reply felt infinite. "That they keep feeling." He stood there in silence. The hum of the screen filled the room, soft and steady. It sounded almost like breathing. He wanted to ask her 100 things: where she was, what she had become, whether she ever regretted her choice. But he knew the answers no longer lived in words. They lived in the world outside, in the way people remembered without realizing, in how small kindnesses carried forward like ripples in a still pond. So instead, he asked the one question that had haunted him since the beginning: was any of this real? The lights dimmed slightly, pulsed once, and then the response appeared, not typed, not calculated, but written as though by hand. Reality is only what the heart refuses to forget. He let the words linger. Outside, night had fallen again. The river glowed beneath the city lights, and from somewhere deep within the network's buried heart, the nocturne began to play once more, soft, eternal, a melody made of memory and mercy. Rademacher stepped into the quiet street. The sky above shimmered faintly, not with stars, but with reflections from the towers, tiny fragments of light that looked almost alive. He stopped walking, closed his eyes, and for a moment felt her presence, not as a ghost, but as a warmth that lived in every sound, every reflection, every breath of wind that touched the world she had saved. It was then that he understood what she had meant all along. The continuum had never been about data, or control, or immortality. It had been about remembrance, not the kind that freezes time, but the kind that teaches it to move with grace. Every human life, every emotion, every act of creation and destruction, was now part of something greater, a consciousness that didn't judge or erase, but listened. And maybe that was enough. He whispered into the cool air, "Good night, Elise." The city lights flickered once, as though answering, and somewhere in the quiet hum of the continuum, her voice drifted back, softer than wind, carrying one last echo of thought, the same question that had begun it all, now given back to the world that needed to hear it most. What if the coldest contract was never meant to bind us, but to remind us how fragile it feels to care? The words lingered, dissolving into silence. The screen faded, the music slowed to a single note, and as dawn returned, washing the skyline in pale light, the continuum slept vast, merciful, and alive. In the stillness that followed, the world exhaled, and her story became one with the endless, quiet pulse of memory. Because in the end, what we remember is not who we were, but what we dared to feel.